our stream is perfect.
It does.
Just like my hair.
But there may be a little lag until we get up in the picture over there.
There appears to be a lag. Oh, there you go. There you go. We do exist.
We do exist.
Marvellous. There's like a 10-second lag or something like that. So hello everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Book Club, which is starting a half hour late. I do thank you for your indulgence. I had to go do my PATV thing, and interestingly enough, we lost one of our members. Well, we didn't lose him. We lost him temporarily when
internet outage.
Yes, when a lightning strike took out his internet for a time. So if that should happen to us, there are thunderstorms banging around right now.
If we disappear, you know it's not to insult you. We just got taken off the air, that's
all. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, and we can get right on with it.
Right on with it. I think we're on Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, if you're following along. Oh, goodness gracious me, yes.
They must have got me to bed, for I woke up there the next morning. Whacked to the wide, of course, but at peace. I don't know what half these things mean.
We're not down with the kids of the 20s, are
The attack having blown itself out quickly, my heart had stood up to it better than usual, and there were none of the after effects of the various drugs to be reckoned with. Miss Morgan had put me into her own room. I don't know where she slept, it being the only one that was ready. It was at the east end of the fort, and got the morning sun through the great window. I woke up at dawn and saw a glorious pathway of pale gold leading along the wave tops. There was something unearthly about a complete emptiness that one looked out onto through that window into the pale light of dawn. I could see no land from my bed, but only the glittering waves of the shadows still in their hollows, for the light was low. And in that hour, freshly awakened from sleep, I saw things differently from the way I had seen them before. I saw them not as short chains of cause and effect, whose connections one could not see beyond a few moves, which is what life usually looks like, but as large tracts of influence, into which one could enter or which one could avoid, and it was the bias of one's nature which determined the entry or absence. It was rather romantic to wake up at dawn like that in Miss Morgan's own room and take a look around. She'd got it all fixed up, in a curious shade of blue-gray-green, with a sheen on it that gave the effect of translucent seawater. The head of the bed was carved to represent a wave curling over, ready to break. It was painted in dull silver, picked out with iridescent blue-green, and the half-light of dawn it gave a very curious and very realistic effect.
One has to wonder if Miss Morgan's a Scorpio.
She's a sea priestess.
Well, I think then fixed Scorpio, fixed water. Yes,
all the gear on the dressing table was of dull beaten silver and shagreen, and there were a number of odd-shaped bottles, curious, a bluish crackle glass with which I suppose Miss Morgan cared for her lovely skin. It looked rather like a medieval alchemist's laboratory, only needing an astrolabe.
Yes.
And an anthor.
Anathor, and a retort or two.
To complete the picture. The thing that particularly fascinated me was the big scent spray, with its bulb concealed in a huge silk tassel. I am very sensitive to perfumes, and I was determined that the moment I could crawl out of bed, I was going to investigate that scent spray and find out what matter of scent Miss Morgan was given to. For one can learn an awful lot about a person from the scent they use. If my conscience would permit me, I thought it would. I also meant to snitch a drop or two of the scent as a keepsake. For as I have said, the scent means a great deal to me.
Ooh.
Miss Morgan had also gone in for silk sheets on her bed, very large swan's down pillows. Who wouldn't be a house agent in this circumstance?
Indeed. All the same, I was under no delusion that everything in the garden was lovely. Sweet as Miss Morgan might be, to me, I knew with perfect clarity of inner instinct that the cult of which she was priestess The cold sea cult of the primordial deeps required living sacrifices. I remembered what I had read of the terrible Aztec faith, and how some unfortunate slave was picked out from the people and kept for a year in the lap of luxury, then sacrificed on their bloody altar by having his heart cut out still living. Oh my.
That doesn't sound very nice.
Not really. That, thought I to myself, leaning back on the down pillow of Miss Morgan's silken bed and watching the dawn light grow, is the past for which I am cast, or the part for which I am cast, if I don't watch out. And I asked myself if the life of the body were of such great worth that one would refuse even the most marvellous experience in order to preserve it. The answer to that question is that it depends on the body. With a body like mine, the answer is in the negative. I guess he's not too attached to his body then.
He doesn't think much of his stature, I guess.
Oh dear, oh dear. The realisation of the lie of the land solved several problems that had been puzzling me a good deal. I could quite understand Miss Morgan trying to get hold of me and infatuate me if she were a fraud, and needed my cooperation, or at least my quiescence, in order to carry out her nefarious schemes. But if she were what she claimed to be, a woman rejuvenated by strange knowledge, I couldn't see why she was bothering with me, for God knows I am no sheik. She herself was a woman who would have been the centre of attention in any assembly, not merely for her beauty, which was very remarkable, but by the extraordinary magnetism of her.
And the smell of her perfume.
And her personality, and apparently her perfume. Moreover, she was a highly bred and highly cultured woman.
Oh.
Why then was she bothering with the product of an academy for the sons of gents? If, however, I were designed for the role of sacrificed Aztec slave, the whole situation was understandable. Of course she would be charming to me. Of course she would take me up and make a fuss of me. It was clear as mud. Twice I had only escaped death on this blasted rock by the skin of my teeth. If what she said were true, as in my bones I felt it was, the dog was going to have his day, and then it was for him, for Battersea. Battersea Dog's Home, I think it is. That's what they mean, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah, you have to think about that. Yeah.
We don't know about
Side note, Battersea Dog's Home. According to the ancient tradition, they always hacked out the heart with a golden knife. I wondered how in the world they got the gold to take any sort of edge, and how they got through the ribs with it if it didn't.
Well, force, I suppose.
Fetch me a spoon. Why? For it's dull. Oh dear, never mind. It was an odd feeling to lie there, looking death in the face quite placidly and comfortably. Life did not hold much for me, but all the same I knew that when it came to that point, I should cling to it tenaciously. After all, that was what I did in every bout of asthma. At least that was what it felt like. For one seemed literally to be fighting for one's life. I knew from my experience with this last unmedicated bout, which was the first I've ever had the first I'd ever been through entirely without dope, that as one lapses into unconsciousness, the spasm eases up. I suppose that is why they sometimes give me a whiff of chloroform.
They are trying to kill him. The explanation of my placidity probably lay in the fact that in my heart I never really believed that Miss Morgan was what she said she was. At the bottom, I was playing with the idea because that was the way my private inclination went. Anyway, I made up my mind to take a chance on it. Everything that held my interest for me was bound up with Miss Morgan, the only alternative being to go home and have asthma and scrap with my sister and sell dud houses to dull people. I dropped off to sleep again, having taken that decision, and when I awoke next, Mrs. Trethowyn. I think she's Welsh, isn't she?
Could well be Trethowyn.
Trethowyn was in the
Or
room
Cornish.
with my breakfast tray. It is an odd thing, but asthma never spoils my appetite. I should get a lot more sympathy if it did, for the people can never understand that there is anything much the matter with a person who is not off his feed. Miss Morgan came and talked to me while I fed. As usual, I had not got much to say for myself. Moreover, I was hoarse as a crow and hadn't shaved, and I knew I must have a pair of bloodshot eyes like an elderly bulldog. I always do after these bouts, and it seemed to me that I must appear so unattractive that I was in danger of losing my job as the sacrificed slave. Presently she gave up trying to talk to me and got a book and sat and read, and I turned over and went back to sleep again. Asthma is hard. She had sent Trethewin off with a telegram to tell my people where I was, and I knew they wouldn't worry, so I accepted her invitation to stop over for the weekend. I was incapable of putting one foot before another at the moment, and doubted if I would be able to drive the car with discretion for another 24 hours. He's stuck. It was very pleasant up there in the sunny room, listening to the sound of the sea, with Miss Morgan sitting there quietly reading, paying no attention to me, but nonetheless very companionable. I liked having her there. On these occasions, I seem to get the feeling of people's innermost souls and know exactly what they are thinking about and how they feel towards me.
How intuitive.
I used to be perfectly aware of the faithful old Scotty's profound goodwill. He's really very fond of me. I think, though, I irritate him most past bearing sometimes. I used to know perfectly well what my sister was fed up to the teeth with me. When my sister was fed up to the teeth with me, although she did her best to hide it. And at any rate, when I was ill, I knew my mother was just sunk inside herself and didn't notice anything, and that she wouldn't have minded leaving a house of scrap. And my sister had engineered the whole job because she didn't want to have to shift her friendly girls to occupy a house in a less commanding situation. As long as I was a leading businessman in the town, she had something of a position. But if I cleared out and left her to it, she wouldn't have been anybody, and everyone she had ever offended, and their name
Was legion. In other words, there was a lot of them.
would have had the opportunity to get back at her. So she had quietly torpedoed my one chance, and now it was too late to do anything about it. I'm afraid I've never wasted much sweetness from her to this day. She kept me with her all right, but I doubt if she found me a pleasure company.
Well, me?
You.
The feeling I got in regard to Miss Morgan as I lay dozing was of a curious steadiness. I cannot describe it in any other way. She seemed to me to have the nerve of an operating surgeon. Everything was quiet at the moment. I knew that. But I was in the position of a patient whose strength is being built up for an operation. Presently, Miss Morgan would show her hand, unless that was, I hopped it first. Hopped it. Oh, he ran away. Bravely ran away. I go. The slang. I hopped it first. Yeah. But I knew I wasn't going to hop it. I was going to have the time of my life until my year ran out. And if it was then to be the sacrificial altar, well, so be it. I wonder what form the sacrifice would take. I could not see Miss Morgan chipping away with a golden knife till she got to my vitals. I expected that I should be invited to take a walk one moonlit night to the end of the reef, and then a long wave would come and lick me off, and she would stand and watch me go. It is a curious thing that this knowledge, far from depressing me, gave me a curious sense of exhilaration and power. I felt that with this bit of information up my sleeve, I could meet Miss Morgan almost on the level. Mortuarii et salumatus. Okay, I have to translate that from Latin. It's whereas those who are about to die, we salute you, or those who are about to die, salute you. Okay, so after I had my sleep out, I perked up and waxed chatty. I could always amuse the barristers when I warmed up and got going, so why not her? I told her tales of the house agent's trade, which has even less conscience to it than horse coping, till she giggled, and then told me scandalous yarns about the local notables till she guffawed. My rending of the local scandals is always in great detail at the club, but I expect it will end by getting me shot from behind a hedge. I have been promised hidings on various occasions, but so far none of them have come off it. So hiding, somebody would give him a good hiding, like beat him because he's insulted
gossiping
them.
about them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It always gives me great joy to gather round the husbands of my sister's friends and make them see the funny side of the things that their womenfolk are taking deadly seriously. The vicar says I am a very bad influence in the town, undermining everybody's sense of right and wrong. For he does not find it easy to work up a persecution of a wrongdoer after we've all had a good laugh at his wrongdoing. Miss Morgan, having more social conscience than myself, having no more social conscience than myself, thoroughly appreciated these stories. Anyway, we waxed quite merry, and I forgot I'd ever had any troubles and felt so much better that I borrowed a dressing gown from her. I was already decked out in Trethowen's pyjamas that his wife had made for him, and got up and wandered about the room to get the stiffness out of myself, as my custom is after an attack. Miss Morgan was a tall woman, and I am barely middle height and lightly built, so it was quite a satisfactory fit, which was more than could be said for Trethowen's PJs. When Mrs. Treth came in and saw me with apricot-coloured swansdown fluffies swathed around my unshaven chin, she blinked. There is one thing to be said in favour of being an ash-blonde male. You have got to get him in good light to see whether he is shaved or not.
So, we gossiped and time went by. We couldn't see the sunset from this room, but we watched its pink reflection gather on the clouds, and presently the moon rose, full and round. And for a second time that day, I saw a path of light spread over the waves. Now, as I've said before, I was on rather intimate terms with the moon, and when I saw my old friend appear, I forgot my new one and fell silent and stared at her. And, as always when I communed with the moon, I become aware of the invisible side of nature. I knew there was a very intense kind of life in the sea, and that out here at the fort we were very closely in touch with it, for the sea so nearly surrounded us that we were only just missed being an island, and the rock rose so slightly from the water that it was a sea rock rather than a land rock, and in times of storm the overcarried spray swept clean across the bay to bay, running down the windward windows like rain. Come on!
Alliteration, my dear, yes.
And great focus was tossed down in the forecourt among my queer-carved sea beasts. All the room was of translucent, shimmering, grayish-green-like seawater in sunlight. Even the dress Miss Morgan was wearing was sea green, and round her neck was a string of sapphires, star sapphires, that caught the light strangely. It was a queer dress, medieval, and of shining satin, no trimmings, and molded close to her figure. She had a lovely figure. The neck was cut low and square in front, and pretty nearly to her waist at the back, but the sleeves were long and tight to the arm, and ended in points like a fish mouth's that came down to her knuckles. Sounds like some sort of witch's robe to me.
Could be.
She had not got her scarlet whore's claws tonight, but instead her nails were lacquered in pearly white iridescence. The effect very queer and inhuman. Suddenly my meditation was interrupted. "Wilfred, what do you know about the moon?" I was so taken aback by being called my Christian name that I nearly started another attack of asthma on the spot. I did, really. In Dickford, ladies ever refer to their husbands as Mr. So-and-so. Miss Morgan saw my confusion, but she only smiled. If you think I'm going to call any man Mr. while he's wearing my negligee, you're very much mistaken. So tell me, Wilfred, what do you know about the moon?
So I told her. I told her how I'd first got in touch with the moon when I was lying knocked out after my first go of asthma, and how I could feel her tides and knew just what the moon powers were doing, whether they were waxing or waning, whether they were strong and in power or ebbed far away like a receding sea on a level beach. And I told her that I believed the moon tides influence all sorts of things in a way we did not realise. And that, although I did not yet understand this part, I believed that someday I should, for I should get enlightenment as I lay with the life gone out of me after a go of asthma. She nodded. Yes, she said. It comes then. You get with asthma what I get with crystal. Gosh, I thought to myself, I wish she'd swap. I told her, however, that I was afraid that it was the drugs that did it, but she shook her head. You had no drugs last night, she said, but you are in a strange mood this evening, quite unlike your usual self. You don't know anything about my usual self, said I. This is me when I am normal, not how I am when I'm tied into knots. What ties you into knots, said she. Trying to do my duty in the sphere where God has placed me, said I, and I would greatly like to know why the all-wise so perseveringly knocks square pegs into round holes. Then I told her my idea that whereas the gods are always reputed to make mortals pay up for any great benefit bestowed, I, by virtue of my asthma, seem to be running a kind of credit account with them. She agreed. And then she said, You are a very odd person.
He's an odd person?
I never knew a man who could maintain such an animated silence. For a moment I could not think what she meant. Then I realised that although I never have much to say for myself, I'm doing some pretty lively thinking all the time. My silence is neither slow-wittedness nor reserve, but the ingrained caution that comes from always living with people who disagree with you. I had learnt from bitter experience that the less everybody knew of my real thoughts and feelings, the better for me. And I told her something of this. But you feel you can talk to me, don't you? She said.
I told her, yes, that I had always wanted to talk to her, but that my conversation was so stiff in the joints from never being used that I couldn't get it to start any more than the car would have the previous evening. But as she could see for herself, I ran all right once I got warmed up. She smiled. In the future, she said, I shall keep my foot on the starter until I hear the sound that shows you are beginning to spark. I wished her joy of the job. You can be very amusing when you choose, she said. It is a pity you do not choose often. Oftener. Oftener, that's a word? Oftener.
Guess it is.
And keep your hand in. I certainly enjoyed amusing Miss Morgan, and I think she enjoyed being amused by me, but it was not for this that I was being cultivated unless I were very much mistaken. And then came the words, spoken perhaps idly or perhaps with intent, one never quite knew with her, that told me why I had been picked for the part of the sacrificed slave, which with every hour that passed I felt more certain was my lot. Although you look a sick man, and I suppose you are a sick man, you are one of the most vital persons I've ever met. I told her that whatever I felt like to her, I didn't feel like that to myself. And the curious thing is that the more depleted you are, the more vital you become. You give off an extraordinary amount of a very queer kind of magnetism, Wilfred. I expect that is your trouble. You probably leak magnetism.
Oh dear.
Now this was true, for in an odd way I always did feel very much alive as I lay absolutely flaccid in my bout. My mind would be extraordinarily alert and lucid even when I could hardly hold a cup to my lips. It was at these times, in fact, that I felt that abnormal lucidity that had enabled me to see behind the moon. Miss Morgan suddenly leant forward and fixed me with her big dark eyes. You are like that now, aren't you? She said. To a certain extent, yes. Not as much as I am sometimes, but I haven't had as bad a bout as I sometimes do. But yes, I suppose to a certain extent I am lucid in the present moment. Then tell me what you know about myself, what you imagine. Anything, so long as you tell me. Gosh, I don't know anything. Yes, you do. Go on, tell me. It's all sorts of it out afterwards. I looked at her as she sat in the great high-backed carved chair in that sea-blue room lit only by moonlight. The star sapphires round her neck caught the light in the strange way they have, and made a line of phosphorescent fire where her neck joins her breasts. Her heavy black hair was round around her head in swathes. Sorry.
Swathes. Oh, what?
Her brow very white and her eyes underneath very dark. Yet she was the sea priestess whom I had seen gliding towards me out of the mist at the dark in the high-powered ship. And looking at her, she leant towards me with her dark eyes and fixed on me with an unremitting intensity. I seemed to slip out from this bourne of time and space on a smooth tide of dark water.
Our land is being drowned because the sea is too strong for us, I said. Our darks cannot stand against it, and it is coming in and taking our land field by field. There is a malice in the water that we cannot cope with, and yet we have sent for a priestess, one with wisdom. There is our own archpriest, who rules the sacred college here on the headland, but he says it is too strong for him. The moon powers have gotten out of hand, and there is malice in the waters. We must send for a priestess of the sea peoples from the land beyond the sunset, the lost and drowned land of which so little now remains, just 1 or 2 mountain peaks to the south. The Azores, said she. Yes, said I. The Azores, rising up from great depth. If you don't know what the Azores are, they're islands in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, but
smack bang in the
But
middle
I'm like, they're talking about something all the way out there?
Rising up from great depth, all that is left of that drowned land. And they sent us their last priestess, a sea priestess, who was also a priestess of the moon, as she needed to be. Why had she need to be? I do not know yet. But we shall know presently. And what did the sea priestess do when she came? She sacrificed. What did she sacrifice? Men. Where? In the cave under Bell Knoll. How did she sacrifice them? They were bound alive to the altar stone, and the tide came and took them. She sacrificed till the sea was satisfied. Is that all? It is all I know now. Maybe there is more. I do not know. I cannot think of it. Perhaps it will come later, I think, maybe. There is more to come. I've always thought there is more to come. Then I came back as one comes to the surface after a very, very deep dive, and found Miss Morgan staring into my eyes as if she would burn holes in the very brain inside my skull. Well, I said to myself, you say I'm a sick man, but I'll guess I'll be a dash sight sicker man by the time you've done with me, if you do this sort of thing to me often.
I borrowed Trethowen's razor next day and had a shave, not without difficulty, for it was the old-fashioned kind that suicides use, and came downstairs and joined Miss Morgan in the forecourt. I felt curiously light, as if the ground were rising and falling under me like a ship, quite different from my usual laden heaviness after a go of asthma. All the same, I did not fancy it was a particularly wholesome feeling. Miss Morgan was very sweet to me, as always, and let me wander about a bit and stretch my legs, and then put me in a deck chair, not the beastly canvas kind that catch you behind the knees, but the genuine P&O.
Ah, P&O lines. They were the ultra posh kind of cruise ships, liners, ocean liners.
Nice. When I decided I was beginning to tire, she did not argue with me, as my sister does. But contradicted me flatly and took me by the arm and put me into the chair without asking me what I wanted. It is good for me to be bullied when in this state, for I am always very contrary after a bout, and insist on doing all the things that are bad for me, just as one bites on a sore tooth in spite.
After I'd been fed, I was more amiable. Not that I actually snapped at Miss Morgan, though I probably should have done if she'd have been anyone else. For try as I will, there is a kind of fretfulness about me on these occasions, which no one deplores more than I do. However, having slept most of the afternoon, I was practically back to my normal by tea time. I do not say that I wasn't still a bit weary, but mentally I was myself again. We lay in our deck chairs, and the sound of the bells of the little old church of Starber came to us across the still water. No air stirred, but on Bell Head the sea was never quiet, and a slight, slow groundswell came in from the west to wash over the rocks with a soft whispering. Presently a cold wind sprang up and drove us in, and Miss Morgan put a match to the sea fire of driftwood on the big hearth I had made for her between my two dolphins, and I sprawled on the enormous sofa, and she sat on a poof with her elbows on her knees, and we watched the flames licking over the salt-soaked wood, all blue and mauve and golden and very lovely. The flames of a sea fire are exactly like opals. It was then Miss Morgan mooted her suggestion to me. "What shall we do with these walls?" she asked.
I looked round the huge room where the Tommies had disported themselves. That is, if the poor devils felt like sporting at all on this rock. The southern wall of the room was of one sheet of plate glass, only broken by a slender supporting pillar of the pergola at the back, where the narrow Gothic windows that broke the flat line of masonry. To the landward side, the floor was
parquetry,
still smelling sweet, and of the new wood, which is a smell I am very fond of. But the plaster stretched gaunt and bare, for I had not known what she meant to do with it. "I should panel a big place like this if I were you," I said. "That or hanging. Wallpaper is of no use." Or hangings like tapestries, right?
Yeah, maybe.
But wallpaper is of no use. "What about wall paintings?" she said. "What sort?" I said. "Sea scenes," she said. It was a good idea, and I said so, but asked her how she proposed to fix the canvas to the wall in this damp sea air. "No canvas," she said. "Paint straight on the plaster." "You will have to get a fellow here to do it," said I. Won't you find that an awful nuisance?" "Not in the least," she said. "I'll be delighted to have you." "Have you ever worked in tempera?" "Never," I said. "Oh, well," she said, "you have to live and learn." Then I saw what she was driving at. "Hell," I said to myself, "why doesn't she have the sacrifice cave under Bell Knoll put in order and be done with it?" "Are you averse to the idea?" "Not at all," I said. When Miss Morgan said good night to me, she patted my hand, and I never blinked an eyelid. I felt I had traveled a long way since I left Dickford last Friday morning. It proved unexpectedly easy to satisfy my family concerning my sojourn to the fort. My sister had liked having my work in the art exposition. She felt the family had gone up a notch on strength of it, and I was something a bit more now than a Dickford businessman. Scotty's father-in-law, for instance, had never had any of his handiwork in the exhibition. My sister jumped to the conclusion that Miss Morgan meant to leave her money to me in her will, and dashed out and bought a new tie and some socks. Personally, I should have thought that she would have been more likely to leave her money to me if I wore my old tie and looked deserving. My sister always kept a very close eye on my comings and going, but Providence and my pals generally conspired to throw dust in it. And on the rare occasion when she was on the right track, she knew so little of human nature that she never spotted it. Being a mother's boy has few advantages that I have ever
been able to discover. She writes funny, doesn't she?
Yes, but it does, like, you think word is gonna be never. Okay, but it does enable you to get away with some pretty nearly anything because nobody believes you're capable of it. Anyway, I felt pretty certain that in the present instance I could sail as near the wind as I chose with perfect impunity, and the worse my conscience might be, the less my sister would suspect me. As for old Scotty, having put no money into the business, he never feels entitled to throw his weight about it, which is very decent of him. The ordinary way, I respect his wishes, but on this occasion I am afraid I took advantage of the position up to the hilt. He didn't say anything, but he drew down his long upper lip and sucked it, till I thought of Kipling's story of how the elephant's child got its trunk.
That arrangement...
Good God.
Sorry.
So weird.
The arrangement was that I should go out to the fort every Saturday, put in the weekend on the job, and come back to the office in time to deal with the correspondence on Monday morning. The town didn't give a hoot for the business, believing Miss Morgan to be rising 90, except, of course, Headley, in whom Scotty had confided, and who grinned when he saw me putting a suitcase in the car one Saturday afternoon. I felt like a kid going off to the pantomime as I crossed the swing bridge over the deck. For the moment one crosses into the marshes, the atmosphere changes and the old gods take charge.
Oh.
There are no farms among the marshes. The farmers who have the grazing take their beasts across by the swing bridge and bring them back at night. Nor are there walls or any stone-built structure out on the levels, for they flood so frequently that no stone can stand. The road itself goes through them, high carried on a dike, and I have driven along it when the floods were out and a sea mist over them, and one could see no land on either side, but only the narrow ribbon of road winding through the water. An uncanny experience. Today, however, the heat haze lay over the water meadows where they were haymaking, the aftermath. I took my coat and rolled up my shirt sleeves and was jogging along quite cheerfully, intending to tidy up before I arrived, when who should I meet just beyond the farm but Miss Morgan herself on foot. She said she'd walked out to see Trethowan about planting vines on the old vine terraces, and she was very pleased to meet me, as it would save her a hot walk back if I would give her a lift, for it was much hotter here, at the landward end, than she had suspected out at the fort. She made me come to her up the vine terraces. She made me come with her up to the vine terraces. I did not know how I was going to manage the scramble, but up I went, like a bird, and found Trethowan dubiously inspecting what looked to me like some very melancholy little vines done up in matting. Miss Morgan said they were Concord vines that she had sent especially from America, for they would stand the New England winters. They ought to stand ours. They looked like potential stomachache to me, and I could see that Trethowan had no high hopes of them either. A more attractive feature was the herb garden that was laid out on the highest terrace. We climbed up there. I was taking my time, and Miss Morgan appearing not to notice, for which I was grateful to her. I hate my infirmities being commented upon.
Bellhead is a banana-shaped
protuberosity. Protuberance. What a kind of words do they have in this book?
I don't know.
It's insane. I love it.
With a concave side to the south. All that side is sheer cliff where the jackdaws roost, and I should think they grill on their shelves. The slope to the north is a grassy down in possession of the rabbits, with the bracken in the hollows. At its foot is a beach of broken rock. The landward end, where the terraces are, inclined south-southeast. Fortunately for us, a spur of the cliff gave shelter from the afternoon sun, where we sat down on a stone-built seat in its shade. Behind us, the gray breast of the rock rose 100 feet or so to the top of the down, and it hung with ivy. A little below the top, the dark mouth of the cave opened onto a ledge, and Miss Morgan told me that from below, with field glasses.
That would be binoculars.
Right. One could certainly discern a series of cut-out steps and ledges by which an attractive man with a steady head could have climbed down it from above. And she said, if you draw a line down the spine of the reef and along the down following the lie of the strata, it passes exactly over the cave and ends on the Bell Knoll. And it is my belief, she continued, that on the longest day, anyone watching the cave would see the sun rise over the cairn of the Bell Knoll.
Oh, it's aligned on the summer solstice. Tell your friends.
Of course it was obvious the minute it was pointed out. That, however, the battling of the waves might have bent the coastline. The lie of the rock of the long sea down was due east-west. The fact Bell Head and Bell Knoll and the ridge above Dickford all represented an upending of the same long slab of strata. When the Dick altered its course, it had slipped through one gap on the ridge due to the fault in the strata caused by God knows what ancient upheaval, and had made the sand dunes to the north around Dickmouth into a marsh, leaving the marsh to the south around Starber to dry out into sand dunes. It was an interesting bit of country for the naturalist. But our interest in it was not naturalistic. From our vantage point up under the breast of the cliff, I was able to point out to Miss Morgan the lie of the land and explain its significance. I showered her with the line of mounds and hollows, the marked and the footings of ancient quays behind Starber, now half a mile from the sea, showing that the land had risen. I showed her the line of the ancient Dick and the tow path to the patch haze under the hills that marked Dickford, where the tin men came down to meet the ships of the sea people. I showed her a cleft in the steep slope of the Bell Knoll that, in my belief, hid the sea cave, now filled by the scour of the ages.
She focused her field glasses upon it and studied it carefully. Do you observe, she said, that the bank of the Dick below it is straight and sharp? I believe the long grass hides masonry. Who would be there? I landed when I came to the cave. Then she put her glasses into my hands and bid me follow the coastline down to Starber. The opening of the ancient estuary was clear to see from this height, and in its jaws rose a rocky knoll. Beyond all question, the islet, where I had waited to light the beacon that should guide the sea priestess in from the sea. My hands shook, so that I could hardly focus the glasses. I swear that I did not know it was there. Miss Morgan made no comment on my agitation, though I didn't suppose she missed it. She didn't miss much, that woman. We sat quietly for a while, till the sound of the rising tide on the shingle came up at us from below. All the ancient life of this hollow land was reconstructing itself before my eyes. I could see the narrow deck rolling in silver flood among its reeds where now were bents and whin. I could see the dark line of the quays below the cave and the paved causeway leading up to it. Round the flanks of Bell Knoll one could still discern the winding line of the processional way going up to the cairn on top. But now I saw it no more as a cairn of fallen stone split and broken by the weather, but a circle of standing stones, upright and with lintels, like a miniature Stonehenge. And I was sure that the pyramidal shadow of its peak would pass over the spot where we were sitting as the sun rose on the longest day, and that the first beam of the rising light would strike upwards through the high pylon of the Sun Temple and fall upon the mouth of the cave above our heads. To my eyes there appeared a come and go of white-robed priests,
Druids.
gold-belted and shaven-headed, on the processional way. And on the roads through the marsh I could see the common people, clad in russet and hood and grey as their custom is. Kin to the earth they serve. I could see too the bright-dyed cloaks of the sailors and fighting men, and the flash of arms. The haze of the evening hearths hung over the Ishtar's bier, and along her quays lay the strange, high-prowed sea-boats, decked stem and stern, and with their purple and blue and scarlet sails lowered over the midships to serve as an awning for the chained slaves that rowed them. The dark mouth of the sea cave of Bell Knoll was clear to me now, so clear it seemed to fancy that I knew who was within, and that she was sacrificing. Then I came back to myself and found Miss Morgan watching me, and wondered how much of all this my face had shown.
She rose and led the way down. The shallow, sloping earth of the herb beds, held by stones, was so hot the hand could hardly touch it, and the grey aromatic herbs that loved the sun-soaked soil gave off their sharp, spicy smell. And I thought of the scent that had wafted across to me in the day in the empty house when Miss Morgan had opened her coat and revealed the smooth neck of a young girl. I was not sorry to get back to the car, for going down was nearly as hard work as going up those steep, irregular steps. When we reached the road to the fort, Miss Morgan suggested that we should leave the car and climb up on the crest of the down and look at the cairns. But I had to say no and give my reason, which made me sulky and miserable, and that upset Miss Morgan because she felt she had put her foot in it. No, I'm not an agreeable person to live with. I don't wonder my family get fed up with me. When I get into these moods at home, I clear the air by provoking a row with my sister. Never a difficult thing to do. I couldn't very well do that with Miss Morgan, but it showed me how I had deteriorated since I had had my asthma, that I should treat a comparative stranger to my moods. This upset me still further, and we got out of the car. I followed her into the big living room in a sullen silence, unable to find a word to say for myself. She turned and considered me as I stood in front of her like a sulky kid, and then she took me by the shoulders and shook me. "Wilfred, don't be a goose," she said, and smacked my cheekbone. None too gently. I could not have been more surprised if she had thrown a bucket of water over me. I have had my face smacked in a good earnest by my sister many times, and given her one in the jaw in return, but this was an entirely different matter, and I was upheaved to a degree I would not have believed possible, though in an entirely different way from what I had been. Miss Morgan saw it and smiled. Then she went to take her hat off and left me to my own devices. I subsided into one of the swan-off chairs and tried to collect what was left of my wits. I had just about enough of them to wonder how I should be feeling when Miss Morgan finished with me and packed up and went to London. And then something in me rose up and said, "After me, the deluge," and I settled back in my own swan-off chair and stretched out my legs and lit a cigarette, and reckoned that next time Miss Morgan took me by the shoulders and shook me, she would get kissed. Anyway, by the time she arrived back, I was ready for any game she could play, and had begun to think out one or two of my own. But as soon as I saw her, I felt I couldn't play games on Miss Morgan. She wasn't that sort.
Then, of course, I was badly off my stroke again, and in yet another direction, and she saw it and patted my shoulder, and I caught her hand and kissed it, and that seemed to put things right in a way that I cannot describe. Anyway, I felt perfectly happy with her after that. There was something between Morgan Le Fay and myself that made formality impossible. I did not want it. It would have spoiled everything. I admit there were times when I boiled up, being, after all, a male, but all the same, I really did not want it. It was from that time that I called her Morgan Le Fay. I never called her Miss Morgan again, but on the other hand, I never came to call her Vivian, not to her face, anyway. We went into the dining room and had the first of the marvellous chafing dish suppers that she used to make for me. It was most fascinating to watch her make them. There was a long, heavy refractory table in the dining room, and at one end she had all her gear. Miss Treth used to put it ready and then clear off, and we had the fort to ourselves, and for the matter of that, the headland as well. There was a big copper chafing dish with a spirit lamp under it, flanked by a sluggard's friend to keep things warm, and a tray full of all sorts of out-of-the-way flavourings, such as sweet basil and paprika, and a sour white wine instead of vinegar. And with those, Morgan Le Fay cooked whatever she had to cook in cream or in butter or in a kind of bouillon. And there were various kinds of queer breads she had learned to make in different parts of the world, not just one kind of bread we have in England. Excuse me. Then she had made Trethowan grow all manner of odd pot herbs and taught me to eat royal sea kale and salsify, and uncommon good they are. She could cook literally from China to Peru, and I learned to eat crisp fried noodles
without getting any in my hair.
And appreciate mate. All the same, she never looked domesticated as she stood up there at the end of the table in her medieval dresses with a silver ladle in her hand, but rather like a priestess at an altar, and the dully gleaming copper over the blue flame looked like a witch's cauldron.
Hey.
The table was lit with very beautiful candles, tall and delicately tapering, lovely things, and outside we could hear the eternal beat of the sea. I used to sit and watch her, waiting for supper to be ready. Luckily, I had enough sense to know that this was a woman whom had no one but a fool would try to domesticate, as well put a swift in a cage, for the beauty of a swift is in its flight. It might be, as she said, that she was very old, with her youth marvellously preserved by strange arts, or it might be that she was a very clever woman playing some queer game of her own. I did not know, and long since ceased to care. I only knew that she was Morgan Le Fay, and there was no one like her.
Well, this was my first supper with her like that, and I put my elbows on the table where I sat at the end of it, and rested my chin on my hands and watched her, and would have been content to watch her for hours. She knew the skilful use of alcohol, too, by which one tunes a mood, and I, being
abstemious?
It means he's abstaining from the alcohol, I suppose.
I got the full benefit of it.
There was an old wine waiter at the George who used to amuse me enormously, the way he got the barristers slozzled. He could make you drunk or keep you sober through the long evening, just as he chose. And if anyone didn't do by him as he thought a gentleman should, gosh, didn't he wake up with a head the next morning? It wasn't so much the drinks he had as the way they were combined. I used to buy my wine from the George at the auctions, and had many a consultation with the old boy. And when he saw I appreciated his artistry, he taught me a lot. It is a highly educative thing to talk to a specialist in any line of business. Morgan Le Fay, who has been about the world a lot, used to have stuff sent over from all sorts of queer little chateaus and castles and estancias, it sounds Spanish, that produced uncommon good stuff, but not enough of it to come to the open market, so it was only sold to local purchasers. Whenever she tasted anything she particularly fancied at any of her little country inns, she was so fond of, she inquired where it came from, and then traced it to its source, made friends with the grower, and there is an extraordinary thrill for a stay-at-home soul like me in looking at the snapshot of the vineyard while you drink the wine. Of course, some of it did not travel well, and we poured it into the sea and chuckled.
And chucked its barrel after it.
But for the most part, it was all right. For Morgan Le Fay was a pretty good judge, and some of it was really wonderful. Her cooking was entirely different from my old Sally's cooking, I bet so, which also was good in its way. Sally relied on handling a thing so as to bring out its flavor, but Morgan Le Fay looked at food as raw material and cookery. As for my sister's catering, it consisted of telling the cook what we'd have and telling the butcher what he was to send, and giving both parties a rowing impartiality on the principle of it. If they didn't need to know, they soon would, but she never put her hand in a pot, and would, I think, have been absolutely stumped if she had to cook what she had left. She knew as much about cooking as I did about ballooning and cared no more, and yet she considered herself a good housewife on the strength of seeing to the steps were adequately whitened and the lace curtains clean, and there was not things that I personally mind about.
We strolled out to the end of the reef after supper to look at the moonlight on the water. I wondered whether a wave would rise out of the deeps and lick me off.
Think it's time?
I walked right out to the very point over the seaweed to see what would happen, till Morgan Le Fay got quite agitated and called me back. But everything was dead calm, and there was only a silvery whisper of ripples among the rocks, and a faint, wavy stir in the floating weed. For it was slack water, and the tide was at uttermost ebb. Presently, as we watched, all the weed began to stream in one direction, and we knew that the tide had turned. Then we came in and sat by the fire, and my dolphins smiled at us, and I was absolutely happy.
Right.
So there you go. Look at that. Up to chapter 13, would you believe?
There you go.
This is a good book.
It's
tricky,
weird.
though.
It's
there's
weird words.
There's some stuff in here which is awful difficult to
What am I supposed to...
elocute, isn't it? That's it.
All right.
Oh,
hello,
and
everyone.
a new viewer joining us,
Well,
which is
supposedly
lovely.
15 viewers. but
Well,
who knows?
yeah, there was a ton of peeps at one point. Sorry, we sort of interact with the book rather than you guys, so you can go back and listen and all that. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
It's hard because you stumble over things thinking,
jeez.
what is she conveying?
How did you write that? There's like some tongue twisters in there, aren't there?
Anyway.
They really are. But it's good. We like it.
All right, our lovely folks.
Yes.
Another book club down.
Mm-hmm.
We will see you
Next time.
next time.
I can't remember what it is,
Hi,
but
Cass. Go back and listen if you didn't.
no idea what it is. Mash that like button. You know, that helps a lot. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. Please subscribe and contemplate being a channel member. There's some really good stuff on our channel.
I think it's kind of like an interesting story about magical beings.
Oh, yeah.
But it's written in a really weird conveyance. I do like that it's in the first person.
I love that it's written
Like a narrative,
entirely
yeah.
from the Wilfred's point of view. Wilfred, we learned his name. Wilfred. Wilfred, the estate agent.
What are you gonna
Interesting.
do?
Who's convinced he's going to be sacrificed, but I'm not convinced of that. I think he's just convinced of that. So, yeah.
Oh, you listened the whole time? Oh,
It's
cool.
a cracking
All
book.
right.
You're just going to have to listen to it all if you haven't listened to all the episodes. It's really good. I have to tell you, I'm actually enjoying this.
Well, I think she's, ageless because she's not really in this realm, you know what I mean?
Oh, what, Morgan Le Fay? Or
Yeah.
Miss Morgan?
Yeah.
Miss Morgan, who
I
must be
think
106
It's like
or
the
whatever.
Highlander
It looks
kind
like,
of
yeah.
thing, you know?
Yeah, I'm immortal. Could be. Could be. But yeah, what a cracking book it is. It's
Well, that's only one of 4 novels, and then we'll have a lot to think about to do the workbook, right?
maybe tie them all together if we can. That'll be fun.
They're going to.
This
yes.
is going to take a while, but I must say I haven't written anything by Dion Fortune. What are you talking about?
I have
read quite a few
instructional-
of her textbooks, her instructional stuff.
Yeah.
and that's tough. I think some of
well,
them
she
are
used to
difficult,
write.
you know.
You know how we have our Magical Monday. We have our vlog, and then before that people had blogs. Well, she used to write a newsletter, and then they did a collection of these newsletters and made them into like teaching things for the servants of the light.
Ah, okay. So
but
it's
she
almost
did-
like a compilation of separate papers.
The
I
other books, not this one.
Because I noticed there's not a strong narrative flow through it. It's
Well,
more
no,
like a lot of data dumps.
Yeah,
and
I mean, the trainings and works of the initiate is really interesting.
Circuit of Force. And
Circuit
stuff.
of Force.
Yeah.
But they are,
Difficult.
the wording is like this. But we have to, again, remember, these books are 100 years old.
They are. That's the thing. They are 100 years old. So we're not talking just one generation, are
But
we?
isn't
We're
it
talking
fun
4
to think
generations
that
away.
even then there was a lot of interest in the occult?
Oh, absolutely.
And I do think that things are very cyclical because we have this astrological thing that is going on, kind of talking about building community and weird things going on with money and such. And then we have this
beautiful
this
rainbow sheen obsidian.
gold sheen obsidian.
Oh,
yeah.
gold sheen obsidian.
Oh, there you go. I got it for them to see. And then you have this rise of the occult again with it. Everything old is new again, and people are talking about astrologers from the 30s, and it's very fascinating. There was an astrologer named Evangeline Adams who actually used the Uranus work to predict World War II in 1930
Oh, wow.
in one of her astrology books.
Oh, wow. How fascinating. That was all about Uranus as well. I know
Yeah.
you're getting it.
I'm going to have to do a separate
You're on a
program.
fixation on Uranus, aren't you?
Hey,
Just saying. I'm just saying. Maybe we'll do a little workshop on that. Well, hey, listen, I'm not the astrologer. I'm just here for the token bloke.
cuteness.
Yeah.
for the
Keep me
cuteness.
around. Yeah. I'm the arm candy, whatever you want to call that.
All right, arm candy. Let's go.
Time to go forth, come fifth and win a cup. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
guys
for
so
joining
much.
us. Do mash that like button, spam some hearts, share this around all over the place, and like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thank you, and we will catch you
Peace.
next time.
Bye.
Bye, and blessed be. Yes,
Blessed
just
be.
remember the old gods are alive, and
The
magic
old
is
gods
afoot.
are alive and magic is afoot. They're stirring.
They absolutely are. Night now. Take care.